who could not be here. I've said it 3 times, don't forget. Today I learned that Lee's son graduated from Davidson recently with honors. And Leland is very proud. Please help me welcome Lee Keesler to the Charlotte Rotary Club.
Thank you, Carol, and Tony, thank you, and everybody else. I see an awful lot of faces in the crowd that I know, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to be here today. My dad was part of this group for, Martin, almost 38 years, maybe, something like that. And we grew up at home knowing that, I think even in those days, Tuesday was the day. Is that right? Because at the dinner table, we would hear about what happened at Rotary that day. So I know it meant a lot to him, and I know it means a lot to you all, and it means a lot to me to be here today with you. So thanks for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 questions that I get asked most frequently about the library, and maybe you have the same questions. And one of those is, how's the library doing? And let me start with that one. This is actually Dumont and Karen. I want to say a very public thank you to you all. This is actually a very important week at the library. It's the first time since April 2010 that all the libraries have been are open 6 days on a uniform schedule. And that would not have happened without the support of the county commission, and without the support of a lot of volunteers, and without a lot of hard work at the library. And let me just remind everybody where we were. In 08 and 09, we all remember that the world changed, and that began to work its way into public finances in 2010 and 2011. And in those 2 years, the library lost a great deal of its funding from the public sector, specifically from Mecklenburg County, as the county dealt with its own financial challenges. The county and the library board recruited a community task force called the Future of the Library Task Force to come in and take a look at the library's issues and to recommend a path back to stability for the library. Dr. Jim Woodward chaired that. And that group reported out in early 2011 with its report. That report had 39 recommendations for the library to implement. And at that point, we departed from a lot of Charlotte's history. There have been a lot of plans and a lot of task force reports in the history of our community, but in this case, a really remarkable thing happened, and the institution and its board took those recommendations in the task force report and implemented all of them. Vic Phillips a great deal of that credit goes to Vic Phillips, who came in as the first CEO of the library, the first time the library had a CEO, came in 2011 and worked until middle of 2012 when I came in. And Vic and the team at the time at the library implemented 37 of those recommendations. The 2 that remained that we've since implemented were to do a new strategic plan for the library and then to create and launch a new foundation for the library, and both of those have been done. So all 39 of the recommendations were implemented. The plan that Jim Woodward and his task force put together still lives. It's close by. It's not in a drawer collecting dust. It's actually something that we continue to use as we run the library. And so to Demont and Karen in particular, and Jennifer was there before that, I really appreciate y'all's patience and your support of the library, because this institution almost didn't make it through 2011, financially and otherwise. And it was the leadership of folks like Dr. Jim Woodward and the board of the library and Vic Phillips and folks on the county commission who helped it survive. So, and it's my great pleasure today to be a part of it. So this week, as I said, is a big week because it represents fully emerging from the abyss that we went into several years ago, and we're really quite excited about it. Some other things that we've done over the last couple of years is we've rebranded the library. And you may have seen evidence of that. We've done the kinds of things that you probably do in your businesses when you go through a kind of a rough spell. We've done a lot of work on the digital side of our business, and I'll come back to that in a moment. We continue to do great work in taking care of customers, and our customer satisfaction scores are really, I heard this quote the other day, they're so high as to be meaningless, because what you need to strive to do is to continue to get better and better at customer service, and we do try, but when you have 96% customer satisfaction, it doesn't leave a lot of room. How many of y'all know what a net promoter score is? A net promoter score is the percentage of customers who would recommend your service minus the percentage of customers who would not recommend your service. And a pretty good score, Tony's Ice, would be low 70s, USAA, Costco, Amazon, companies like that. When we surveyed folks during our strategic planning process, our net promoter score is 82%. So I've never worked anywhere where customers liked our product or our service better. I've never worked with an employee base of people who enjoyed what they do more than at the library. We've done a good job strengthening our talent, and then we've increased our activity. Our unit sales are called circulation. It's items that are loaned out to library users, and we had about 6 million circulations in 2014. We grew our circulation 3% in 2013 and 5% in 2014. Those are pretty good numbers. On the digital side of our business, we doubled our digital business in 2012. We doubled our digital business in 2013, and we increased it last year in 2014 by almost 50%. And we've won some awards along the way. So the short answer to the question of how's the library doing is the library is actually doing quite well right now. With it's got a lot of momentum. And again, I give credit to board and staff, in particular those who were here when the crash occurred, because they've worked really hard to get us back to where we are. So let's go to question number 2. And that question that I get a lot is, who uses the library? Now let me put all of y'all on the spot. How many of y'all use the library? Okay, thank you. I did do a small sample, Tony, of your club to see what percentage of people use the library, and I was gratified to see that a number of people did use the library, and that I'm also gratified to be able to tell you that almost none of you have outstanding balances on their accounts. Here's the answer to the question who uses the library, and it's true in a figurative sense, not in a literal sense. Everybody uses the library, from the wealthiest families in this community to the poorest. People use the library. And I thought what I'd do is just describe for you some of the people that I've encountered wandering around the library, and that's when I encounter them a lot of times, when I'm wandering around. But here's some people who use the library. One day I was at the desk at Imaginon. That's where I find out, that's where I learn more, is at the front desk of different libraries. And I was at Imaginon, and the guy in his 40s walks up, and he's a little self-conscious, but he asks our employee if we have books that would help children understand divorce. And I didn't know we had those books, but she said, we absolutely do, and let me take you and show you what we have, and we have a whole shelf of them. And so here's a guy who walked in, probably not thinking he would get the answer to his question. But he was really gratified to know that he had that sort of help waiting for him at the library. I'll show you a picture in a moment of a 105-year-old woman that we taught to use the computer. Pretty cool. This afternoon, I'm going to do something I do every 2 weeks. I go out to our University City Library and I read for an hour, 30 minutes with two different kids. I didn't do that when I was at the bank. We had a lot of people at the bank who were doing that sort of thing. I just never felt called to do it, but now I do it. And I've been doing it about a year. I have not read with one child yet who looks like me. Most of the families of these children moved here from another country. The children were probably born here, probably native here, but their parents probably were not. The dads I rarely see, but the mom brings the child in. And somebody that mom trusted said, get your child into the library. They have books and they have people who can help. And so mom will bring the children in, and they're almost across the board. They've all been terrific readers. But it's been really interesting to see the dynamic of these mothers. Most of these children and their families are not speaking English at home. The children become the interpreters for the moms. We have that repeated all across the library system. This summer I met a woman at our Myers Park branch who spent the entire summer studying for a CPA exam. She would go there every day and camp out in one of the carols there and work on a CPA exam. On Sundays, go into a library, one of our regional libraries on Sunday, and you'll find a lot of high school students working on papers and prepping for exams. I went to a book club at the jail that our outreach folks took me to. There were 8 16 and 17-year-old youth offenders who were in jail for everything up to and including murder. And I witnessed this book club discussion that was completely fascinating. And I was stunned by how smart and engaged these guys were. And it was reading and these book discussions that really turned them on. We run into a lot of people in the library who are researching their families. Rob Wright and I had a conversation earlier about this. One day I was in our Robinson Spangler Carolina room, which is in the main library, where it's the single largest repository of genealogical and archives in the Carolinas. And there was an African American fellow walking around, and he was clearly looking for something and hadn't found it. And so he then headed toward the front desk, and so I followed him to find out what he was looking for. He goes up to our librarian at the front desk and he says, I need help. And she said, be happy to help you. And he said, my last name is, and I can't remember what it was, Smith. Wasn't that, it was something else. But I'm descended from, my ancestors were all Joneses. And what I'm trying to figure out is, was my family connected to Jefferson Davis? Which I just thought was fascinating. That he was in there trying to find his family, his historical family. There's a lot of business that goes on in the library, more so than maybe you might think. I've gotten to know a fellow in town who's working with us on a couple fronts. He started his business at the main library, using all the resources there. I was at our Steel Creek Library one day, and there's a room at the Steel Creek Library that's got 6 or 7 study carols in there. He was the only person in there, and I was just hanging out doing some work. And I kept seeing him pacing around the room, and so I snuck over to get a little bit better look. And he had several, what looked like a stack of index cards, and he was walking around the room, this room. It looked like he was working on a sales pitch or working on a speech or something. And he was going to town in there, and he then later was joined by somebody else, so they were working on something together. There are a lot of people who are between work, who show up at the library. I did that after I finished at ASC and I took my planned time off. I spent some time at the library. And there are also, Carol, there are a lot of nonprofit leaders who wander into the library. We partner with the Duke Endowment on a collection of things, of resources for nonprofit organizations. So Karen Calder and Carol Hardison and other people who have roles like that might come to the library and use those resources. Those resources are now available at our regional libraries as well. A real quick plug for the Robinson Spangler Carolina room. I mentioned it's the no, I guess this is a slide. This fellow was in doing research. There are, if do yourself a favor and go there someday and do some research on your family. I went in the first week I showed up at the library. I walked in there and I'm pretty convinced they didn't know who I was. And I went to the front desk and said I'd like to do some research on my family. And so our librarian showed me some resources and a way to do some of the research. And after 45 minutes I had to go do something else. And so I said, I'll come back another time, but thanks for your help. An hour later she shows up in my office with a handful of documents, and one of which showed my family going back to 1706 in South Carolina. I had no idea my family went back into South Carolina. Didn't have any idea they went back that far either. So anyway, lots of resources. I'm going to move ahead so we can get some questions to the third question. And the third question is, that I get asked a lot, and you may have, is do we need public libraries anymore? You know, we got Google, we got Amazon, we got the internet, we got all these things. Do we really need public libraries? And I think it's a legitimate question, and I suspect that many of you all probably ask the same question about your own business from time to time. I think it's healthy that we ask those sorts of questions. And so we ask it ourselves at the library. Public libraries live at the intersection of those 4 boxes up there: literacy, information, lifelong learning, and community. That's the space we live in. And the question, do we need libraries, is all about, do those 4 spaces need public libraries to serve them going forward? There are two sort of corollary questions to the question, do we need libraries? One of which is, the one I like to ask all the time is, if we didn't have it today, would we create it? And I think that's a pretty good question. That 96% up there is that 96% of the people surveyed in our strategic plan said that library locations are an important place to read, work, or study. So we think there's a lot of strong support, but we think you still have to ask the question. Here's an even better question. And I'll give credit to a really wise woman in our community. This is Emily Zimmer, who's the president of the Levine Museum of the New South. She actually quotes a woman who's one of the acknowledged experts nationally in the museum world. And the question, or her assertion, is that museums, to be successful and relevant in the future, have to be either essential or addictive. And so I thought about that from the library standpoint, and asked, I think that's a great question. Are we essential, or are we addictive, or both, or neither? And so here is my answer to the essential part. There's an awful lot of early childhood literacy development that goes on in the library, where we have books and we have materials for young readers, and we have staff to help. And so those are, we're laboratories, and that's not the only place we serve young readers, but these libraries are laboratories. Academic support. One of the Pew Internet survey report that came out most recently about libraries said that 85% of Americans said libraries should work more closely with their local schools. And so the first day of school a couple weeks ago, 51,000 pre-K to third graders took home a very short application to their parents or caregivers to get a library card. And those applications are now coming back to us, and we'll see how many of those we have. But in addition to academic support, we're the largest single place in Charlotte where you can go plug in. We're also a place where digital literacy happens. I suspect that everybody in here has between 2 and 4 devices. Would that be accurate? Everybody got 2 to 4? And you know how to use them to unlock you know how to unlock the power in those devices, exactly, right? Well, here's the analogy. Here's the analogy that would mean something to some of you. All of us know people who have $2,000 worth of golf clubs in a bag, and time and access to go use them, but they don't necessarily know how to use those tools. And it's the same thing with technology. And so one of the things that public libraries will become more and more is a place for digital literacy, where we help people use the devices that are very, very accessible these days, and help them to access the information they're looking for. I'm gonna move ahead, and I'm gonna finish with this. And I'm shifting gears here, and I have to be very careful here, because our institution receives public dollars, and I'm operating in my role as CEO at this moment. And so I can inform you about how the library would use proceeds of the sales tax referendum that's going to be on the ballot in November. I can't advocate, and so I'm informing. I'll ask some of you in the room to keep me honest on this one. In November, there will be a referendum on the ballot that allows our voters to vote for a 1/4% increase in the sales tax. The proceeds of that would go to 4 organizations. 80% of it would go to CMS to supplement the salaries for teachers. 7.5% would go to CPCC to do the same thing. 7.5% would go to ASC to support arts and culture in our community. And 5% would go to the library. And I'm going to tell you now where those dollars would go. We would put those dollars in areas that are chronically underfunded, strategic priorities, or critical to our long-term sustainability. And there are 3 things in particular. One of those is books and materials. That trend line is per capita spending on our collection, and that trend line is going the wrong direction. And so that's something that's not sustainable. And so we would use some of the proceeds to buy not just traditional print, but also electronic materials. Secondly, we would use proceeds to support our digital channel. That is the growth in our digital channel. I spoke earlier about how it's growing. And then thirdly, the light blue is our annual investment, what we've been able to invest annually in small capital repairs and replacements in our branches. The larger blue represents depreciation in our facilities. And I don't have to tell you what happens when either you're at your home or your church or in your business. If we don't take care of the facilities we have, at some point we're going to have to replace the facilities down the road. So those are the 3 things that we would use. And let me stop there. We're about out of time. I'll be happy to take a question if you've got a question.